Once you've created a new template, there are basically two steps left. First, you create what's called the setup sequence, which creates all the files that are not relevant to customization. The final step, we create all the customizable files and any other files that are necessary for generating them. We're going to do the setup sequence in this video, starting with what we already created before. So we can follow the steps as shown here. And you see that there is a loop where you first identify steps that you took to create the sample, and then you add them to the config for the template, and finally you generate code and check and see whether it has everything it needs, and you repeat until you've got the setup sequence working. Let's start with the code that we created. First of all, let me show you what we're talking about in terms of a config file. Code right here is for the generated template, and what we want to do here is modify this file config. This right now doesn't contain much except for some general stuff. What we want to do is add the startup sequence. The startup sequence specified using placeholder app creation, so we can stick that in right now and build something. Now, there are 4 categories that really fall into 2. The first 2 are commands that you execute, and the 3rd and 4th are simply adding packages, either for main or div. As far as the commands go, there are interactive ones that require input from the user, and then there are the preferred pre-commands. A pre-command example would be create React app or something like that. We'll need 1 or 2 ourselves. Interactive ones for us are going to include Oakleaf, because Oakleaf is what we use to generate this, and so far as I know, I'm not aware of a way to do it that will work for us other than interactively. So let's add this. The example happens to be what we need, but you could always copy it and modify it. If you are familiar with creating and spawning child processes in Node, then you'll understand this pretty much intuitively. If not, you can follow the documentation. Here we specify the command in file, and then we have arguments for it. Now what we want to run is Oakleaf, but we don't know whether it's installed globally on the machine of the person using this. So we run npx, and then Oakleaf is the first parameter, and then we give its parameters. We have to have multi to indicate a multiple template, and the name of the code base being generated, which is always $appdir, the config file. Let's go ahead, run this the way it is now, and this will be our first iteration through. We need to get the proper command right here. We can use all of the definitions that we've already pasted in here for various variables. The -f flag is for force, and what that does is it removes the starter each time, which is very useful because we're going to be iterating and need to recreate it many times. So here we have trajectory. You want to keep that the same so that you can make comparisons between your generated code and the sample code, and they should be as consistent as possible. Really, I could add description, but I'm just ignoring description for now. This is going to go through the process. This is still Oakleaf's process itself that we've spawned it, and it's going to run. And what we're going to do is the basic process that we're following here, making 2 files as consistent as possible. One of them is our code and the others are sample, and when they are the same, then we know that we are done and we have generated a working sample of what we were trying to create using our template. This is, you can use Diff to compare the 2, and so that's what we're going to do as soon as this is done running. We're going to have to define Diff's file. That will be just a file that we use for simplicity, so that we can keep opening it and viewing the results. So let's define Diff's file. And then we have to call to Diff itself directly. But what we should do, I think, is copy into our Scratch the Diff call, because you can see that there are some excludes here. We're excluding node modules, we're excluding get, and that makes sense, and we'll probably have to add more soon. So first, let's run that and look at the results. Here we see 3 types of results. You have files that differ between sample and code. You also have files that are only added on the code side and don't appear in the sample. And then you have many files that are not being generated that are in the sample, which is not surprising. We've only just begun. Only thing, it's helpful to just look over the list and make sure that the things that are not being generated are pretty much unique to the sample itself, or are things that are relevant in general to what we're doing, but almost always that's going to be the case. So you don't really have to look at those. New files that are added, though, can be important. Notice here that we have hello and hello test being added. That is a problem because those are generated by Oak Cliff automatically. So we want to take care of that. How do we do that? Well, there is a remove function built into Bash, and so we'll call remove to remove those files. You notice that I put into the exclude Git, but we know that Git is not being developed, so we have to produce Git as well. There is another thing, which is that we want our template to have the latest of everything, or at least not to have any security issues. So what we want is, it happens to be one that got generated when we generated this. I happen to know because a one low severity vulnerability, it happens to be the version of Mocha. I know because I generated it myself, the example. And if we look in package.json, we'll see that. Actually, the truth is that's going to be our next step anyway in a moment. So let me just go into the config, and first let's take care of the things that I've said already. Now, how are we going to install Git? That's going to be through calling git init. Basically, all of those things I could pretty much lift over, I think, the code. Let me look down here. I'm just looking for an example, and there's a link to that right here. So we can always look there. I have a little bit of a cheat sheet here that I'm going to use. I'll put them, I'm just going to stick in the pre-commands, but then I'll explain what I've done. What have I done here? Well, you can give a title for each one, so I call it init git, because when it's run, you'll actually see each one showing up and shown by name. So we're going to call git init with our particular directory, and we also have to delete hello and delete hello test. So those we're calling remove. For the argument, we specify using our app directory, which really should be probably code directory. We're showing the files that are showing up that have to be deleted. Let's look more specifically at the results here. Let's call diffs for file. Check out the difference in package.json, because package.json is a meta file and it's got stuff. It's always worth looking at to make sure that we have the right version of everything. Paste in this code. It's defined diffs for file, and it's set, oh no, it just simply, I didn't use diffs for file yet. I just simply have called it, but that's fine. You can look at this and you can see, okay, the description I did not add. So it makes sense that the description is showing up as a difference in package.json. Here are a number of packages not appearing in our version, and it turns out that all of these are relevant to the particular business logic of sample. So they're not going to be something that we're going to need. Here we have a difference in versions where the code file has a later version than the original project. And that simply means that a later version has come out, and that's great as long as it's non-breaking. Judging from the number, it's probably non-breaking. Now, Mocha, we see a big difference here, and we have to do something about this. It's saying here that the trajectory version has a higher version. We never want that. You always want to be able to have at least the same level as in your other version. To take care of that, we were going to use our div installation. It goes in div instead of main because it's involving testing. So let's paste that in right there. We can now run again our generation of new starter. Because we're using force, it should overwrite it. This is not fun, but we have to do it. And now we're going to wait for this to run. Notice that right now it is installing Mocha. Okay, now that it's finished running, we can diff the directories and look at the results. And you see now that we've gotten rid of the hellos being called. The package.json we probably don't need to look at anymore because we've already compared that, and it gets excluded automatically within NSFlip. So we can just ignore it from our diff. We're done with it now. And we really don't have to look at package lock either. Add those to the exclusion. And just to make sure that I don't forget, I'm going to insert this again, look at the changes again, and now we've gotten rid of the package JSONs. So what we've done now is we've finished step 2 of the process of creating a template, and now we're going to, in the next video, deal with creating customizable files.